today I have a returning guest, Tim Anderson, who was on episode 7 all the way back in January in 2018. A lot's happened since we last had a chat, and I'm keen to catch up and hear what he's been up to. But for all of those people that didn't listen, I'd suggest you go back and listen to that because we touch on Tim's background in detail. But welcome again, Tim, to the podcast.
Adam, man, thanks for having me. So if that was episode 7, where are we now?
I think we're on about 35 or so. So
Okay.
yeah, so I mean, I had a bit of a hiatus last year when we started our business, so it slowed down a bit, but back on track now. So getting probably one or two a month out, so it's all good.
Right on. I was just wondering if it was another multiple of 7. That's just how my mind works.
We'll have to get you on it for the next multiple of 7 then. So I think a great place to start the conversation is what have you learnt over the last 12 months or since we last had our interview? Has there been any revelations in your coaching practice or anything you did now and you've changed?
Oh man, I'm a whole new person since 12 months ago. I mean, I'm sure I've learned tons, but like I don't know. I wouldn't even know where to start. Do you have anything specific?
No, just in terms of your coaching. Like, I mean, you're obviously someone who educates yourself. You're always reading. You're releasing books. What sort of topic areas are you sort of currently looking into, and you researched over the last sort of 12 months?
I think for me, I've personally shifted away from an exercise mindset almost completely to more of a movement mindset, or just honoring our design as humans. I'm especially since probably the last time I talked to you, I've really grown to think that exercise is just something we created as a band-aid for something. We're trying to fix something and we're barking up the wrong tree, kind of. And I don't know. I just see the wonder in our design now, and I just believe that we're truly made to move, and that's what keeps us strong. And it doesn't have to be a sets and reps, man-made kind of thing around specific tools.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense at all.
No, 100%, 100%. And I mean, it fits in with your work with the Original Strength as well. How do you stay up to date? What sort of do you attend courses yourself? I know you obviously coach courses and you do a lot of workshops with your business, but just I guess expanding on your education side of things, what are your sort of go-to resources? Is it? I know you've obviously got a big network of coaches that you look up to, and you've got a lot of mentors. But are there any other avenues you go down in terms of getting answers and reading?
So that's the fun. Well, I don't know if I look for resources as much as they find me. I do have a few sources. Like I try to stay on top of whatever Dan John is doing.
Yeah.
So because like to me, he cuts through the clutter for me, like because he's a no nonsense kind of guy, and if he latches onto something, there must be something to it. So I keep a sharp eye on him. I've got some other really good mentors, and if they get excited about something, they usually tell me about it, and that usually starts the trail for me.
Yeah.
But I can't say that I look at a particular publication or have a specific route that I try to take.
Well, that's good advice though, because I think if you have people like that in your network, you like you said before, you just cut through all the BS. And I mean, there's so much stuff out there. It's hard to know what to read, what's the latest. And if you've got a smart mind like Dan John, you just go straight to him and he tells you what's going on.
Yeah, pretty much. And man, it is like I'm sure you're aware too, but in the fitness industry, like sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. Well, almost all the time you don't know what you don't know. But we went to a personal trainer expo in California, and I have never seen such new gadgets and new methodologies. I mean, it was crazy. Like it was very overwhelming to know that there's that many different things out there. To stay healthy and strong. So it was fascinating and eye opening.
Yeah, and any things that you picked up from there that really stood out to you in terms of, I don't know, whether it's a fitness tracker or something that
So yes, but not in that vein. I picked up on that. I do truly appreciate simplicity, and it more solidified my thought process that movement's the way to go.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, it's good. It reinforces that you're on the right path then.
yeah, it gave me a comfort level that okay, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing.
Exactly. So last time we spoke, we spoke a lot about your original strength courses and obviously your book as well that came out in 2013. But just for perhaps the listeners that have come on recently and might not have heard that episode, but can you just talk us through the principles of pressing reset, what it does, how it works, and why I guess it's been so successful?
Sure. In a nutshell, what we call pressing reset are movements that strengthen your nervous system and help take the brakes or the limitations off your body. And those movements are really embedded into all of our nervous system from birth. They're part of the developmental sequence, and those they do make us stronger as or get us strong as children so that we can conquer our world. But they also are designed to they never leave our nervous system, so they're also designed to always be tapped into throughout our lives and to keep us tied together. And so what we call resets really come from the developmental sequence, but there's pretty much three pillars inside of those resets that if a human does, then they'll always be fairly healthy and strong. And they're breathing with the diaphragm properly, activating the vestibular system, and engaging in the gait pattern. And those are just the three things we're pretty much just designed to do. And if we do those three things all the time, and as we should, then we can stay healthy and strong throughout life, no matter how many years we get to enjoy.
Yeah, and an example of some of those, like your neck nods, your rocking, rolls, and like you said before, loaded carries.
Yeah, so just same thing we all did as a child. Belly breathing, using our eyes and our head, keeping our head on the horizon, moving our head a lot, like children do,
Hmm.
and getting up on all fours, bearing weight on all limbs, rocking back and forth, which is to me is also part of the gait pattern, and crawling. Those just simple childlike movements like that can really restore a person's body, strengthen their nervous system, make good neural connections again, make their nervous system efficient, and reflexively make them very, very tied together.
Yeah, yeah. So last time you spoke, one of the things that stood out, you said that the speed of the nervous system uh, can basically change at, like, the blink of an eye with
Yes.
with the right I guess applications and pushing resets. And I think you gave a bit of a case study of a middle-aged male who couldn't really squat past parallel, and with a couple of the interventions that you used on him, within a couple of minutes he was able to do a squat, ass to grass. Do you have any other examples or case studies that you could speak about of how you can get that instant, I guess, result if you know what you're looking for?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And man, there's hundreds, but I'll just recently I was on a family vacation with my family obviously, but I noticed that my uncle was he really could not get up from seating from a sitting position out of a chair on his own, and he always needed someone to help him stand up, and then he was pretty much slow moving after he got stood up.
Yeah.
So
And how old are you talking? How old is
oh gosh, he's I would say low to mid 60s.
Okay.
He's had some physical trauma issues like knee surgeries and things. But he was very slow moving and very it was a laborious effort for him to try to get out of a chair. And I just asked him if he wanted to try an experiment, and he said sure. So I just showed him how to do cross crawls, touching his opposite hand to his opposite knee while he was sitting in the chair.
Hmm.
And so we did that. He maybe made 20 touches from left to right, right to left. And I said, okay, so now stand up. And it was amazing because without, like before, you could see his body trying to figure it out, and he's bracing himself and getting ready, trying to get up the effort. And he just, when I said stand up, he just kind of pitched forward a little bit and just rose right out of the chair. And it was just that fast.
Yeah.
And that's all we did was touch while he was sitting, touch opposite arm and leg together. I mean, it
Yeah.
was amazing.
And so how did you know, like obviously you've built up years of experience of knowing what to do, but how did you know that that was going to be a simple fix for him?
You know, I've seen cross crawls help so many people move better, and it's the easiest, lowest hanging fruit to latch onto. Like
Yeah.
that's the easiest thing we could have tried. That's easier than trying to teach somebody how to breathe, right? And so I was just betting that his nervous system's going to like that. Just also based off of how I've seen it affect other people, and his nervous system did enjoy that, and he got up out of that chair. And he smiled at me and goes, "Well, I'm going to do that again."
Well, that's instantly you've got buy-in because he's gone from not being able to get up to get up.
Right. And I never that is so, to me, it's so amazing to see how fast or how miraculous the body is in itself. I never get tired of watching that.
Yeah, and just digging a little bit deeper on that, what do you think are the potential mechanisms that are underlying that? Why the cross crawl helped him with that? Obviously, it stimulated part of his nervous system, but what if you could I guess, put your science hat on? What do you think is actually going on a deeper level?
If I were going to try to, it would still be a guess
Yeah.
in the science realm. I would guess that. So when we cross midline and we touch opposite limbs together, it's much like our gait pattern, and it causes the left and the right hemisphere of the brain to communicate with each other. And it may just be that familiar conversation between the two hemispheres that makes the nervous system feel safe enough to take the brakes off to allow a person to move better. And to me, that's all pressing reset does is it helps, it allows the nervous system to feel safe. And it's almost like if you walk in a dark room and you start flipping on the light switches so that you can see. You're reestablishing those connections, or you're just turning the lights back on inside the nervous system so it feels safe and comfortable, knows how to move around and knows where it wants to go. So then it takes the mobility or the restriction limitations off the body and allows it to move.
Yeah. That's a good answer. So the vast majority of the listeners that I get on this podcast are either coaches or fitness enthusiasts. So I guess a relevant question for this subgroup would be the overuse injuries and the smash and bash sort of training mentality. A lot of people get into sort of bad habits with training, and I'm myself as guilty as the next person as well in this area. But with overuse training, what would you suggest for someone who's been in that realm and they get a lot of overuse injuries? And I think you talked a lot about it in your book before, one of your books, talking about how you got into kettlebells and how you had overuse injuries. What are the first steps that someone who's into fitness, and they might be, really proficient, they might have good work capacity, but they're beating themselves up? What's the starting point for someone like that?
Oh man, well, there could be several starting points. Me now, looking back, if I could give anyone any advice on that, it would be stop hurting yourself. So, and I mean that in a sense that sometimes, like in the pursuit of strength and health and whatever the image is we have in our mind, for whatever we're chasing, we have this imaginary trophy or prize that we're competing for, and it simply just does not exist. So in the pursuit of being healthy, we shouldn't hurt our body. We should invigorate our body. If we're taking away from our ability to enjoy life, then we're obviously not adding health to it. We're going the opposite direction. And I think so many of us get stuck in this wheel or mindset of thinking, and we just don't see that we're not adding to our health. We're actually taking away from it. So I guess now, where I am now, my first thing would be, hey, it's okay to not do that for a while so that your body can heal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if what you love to do is not loving you back, maybe you should just think about changing something, step back just a little bit. And then outside of that, it would be, well, why are we hurt? Are we really hurt because you're overdoing something, or are you hurt because you're just not doing it right, or are you hurt because your body's compensating, and it's borrowing from Peter to pay Paul when if you just simply had all the right proper connections in place, what if you could do what you wanted to without getting hurt?
Yeah.
So is there something just lacking, inside that all we have to do is just turn the switch back on?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people. I was certainly in this realm like probably 10 years ago. It's just that sort of thinking of if I do something for 30 minutes, if I do it for 40 minutes, it's going to be better. It's like that whole more is better, and not
Right.
always like you said before. It's about, are you doing it correctly? Are you recovering? And I think probably the biggest revelations for me after interviewing you last time is you put me in touch with Dan John, and then I started to read his book Easy Strength you spoke about, and that probably had one of the biggest impacts on me, and just understanding that you can get strong from submaximal loads and not actually being fatigued.
Yes. So, and the brilliant, like Dan John's just brilliant, but the greatest thing, like same thing with you, that was such an eye opener for me because getting stronger doesn't have to hurt.
No.
And it doesn't it doesn't have to take away from your health. Actually, it shouldn't. And basically, if you just show up every day, that's the biggest thing I've ever gotten from Dan John is if something's important, just do it every day. And it's the people that show up, and it doesn't have to be hard. It's just about clocking in sometimes, or just and in the case of us just being healthy, it's for us to show up is simply for us to move and honor our design. So if whether it's taking a walk every day or just getting outside and moving around, that is showing up.
Yeah.
It's when we don't show up that it's kind of hard to get stronger in a healthy fashion.
Yeah. So if you had to break it down in terms of, I know we'll talk about it a little bit later in terms of your book, but if you were, creating a program for someone, what are the percentages of, like, in terms of restorative work, intensity work, work capacity stuff? What I know it's case by case because everyone's slightly different in terms of the recovery, but what are general principles that you'd recommend and you work with your clients?
So wow, currently in my mind, all those categories are really the same thing now.
Yeah, showing up.
So
Yeah.
yeah, but restorative work, work capacity, strength training, they're really they can all be the same thing. So basically for say new people, what we teach in OS is start where you are. And however you're moving is great. And we just start however you can move. And we try to build from that. I wrote a book called Habitual Strength, and it was heavily inspired by Dan John. And basically, it's just like every day you show up and you press reset, and then you start learning how to move your own body. Maybe you spend 10 minutes a day lying down on your back and standing up, just and getting very familiar with how your body can move, getting up and down from the floor. And then you look for ways to control it creatively. Like, how can you do it slow? Can you do it without using your right arm? Can you do it, can you do it with your eyes closed? And then maybe you spend another 10 minutes of now strength training. Maybe you do body weight squats and push-ups, for 10 minutes and really just, so you press reset for 10 minutes, you lie down, stand up for 10 minutes, and then you do squats and push-ups for 10 minutes. And then, so it can be just that simple. So there's 30 minutes of restorative work, joint mobility, strength training, and, it all, to me, but again, it all fits together.
Yeah. And so you obviously with your programming and just the simplicity of your, I guess, the way you focus on fitness in health, what are there metrics that you would use with clients and that you follow yourself, or do you just really just look at it from a movement standpoint and just keep it really simple, or are there actually metrics that you track over time with people?
I do keep it simple, but I also have created my own and there's nothing, I have my own metrics, but there's nothing magical about them. And it's just something that I use for myself. And once I learned how it worked for me, I would just apply it to my clients to see how it worked for them.
Mm.
And I've learned that they can be very powerful, but there's nothing magical about them. I mean, anything could work. But what I try to do is so let's say to build work capacity. I might have somebody, and it can be something ridiculously as simple as crawling on their hands and knees for 10 minutes. But while they do it, they focus on keeping their lips shut and only breathing in and out of their nose. So now we've got a very gentle movement that we can use to gently increase the heart rate and the breathing rate, and then try to manage the stress of that while keeping the lips shut. Just nasal breathing. And I know it sounds like anybody could do it, but it's a challenge for a great majority of people. But eventually it gets ridiculously easy. And so then, well, okay, now we've done that. What if we change direction or make it harder? So now we can slowly increase the load again to add more of a challenge to the breath. And then eventually that gets ridiculously easy. Okay, so now what if we take our knees off the ground and just crawl on our hands and feet?
Yeah.
And so then now we've upped the challenge again tremendously, but eventually we're able to manage the breath ridiculously easy again, just as if we were just walking to go from our house to our mailbox to see if we had any letters coming in. So I mean, it can be so simple. But the cool thing is how you make ridiculously hard things ridiculously easy also.
Yeah.
If you can manage your breath and the stress that you're putting your body into, and your body's familiar with it, and it doesn't freak out, and your nervous system stays relaxed and calm, man, you take the brakes off of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So just shifting gears I guess it's all interrelated anyway. Your book, you talk a lot about breathing and tongue position, that sort of stuff. So I'd just like to go through it. I've got the copy of the book here, with lots of highlights and everything on it. So I've got lots of questions on the book. But can you just, before we get into the actual book, can you give us an insight on what it means to discover the hero within? Because that's, I think, one of the subtexts, and why you, I guess, decided to write this specific book itself.
So I'm 44, and I'm that big kid that never grew out of wanting to be Superman. And somewhere along the way, I came to understand that, well, I didn't put that want in me. It's just there. It's always been there, and I've never killed it. So,
yeah.
And it always tries to crawl out. And then everything's a journey, but everything I've learned through OS and the process, and how awesome and wonderful the body is, and how wonderful our minds are, I've come to believe that we're all supposed to be superheroes. Like that is put into us. It's not something we planted in ourselves. It's always just been in us. A lot of us ignore it, or a lot of us think it's childish, so we try to put it away. But we're capable of anything, which is so evident if you open your eyes and look around at what man can do. But so the Becoming Bulletproof Project is about realizing who we are, and then realizing our design, and how we can start to engage in that design to take the limits off of our body, but also off of our mind and our imagination even.
Yeah, awesome. And so one of the thing that I actually liked, and it's got quotes throughout the book, it's got that sort of superhero theme through it. There's always, at the start of each chapter, there's a quote from, whether it's Rocky Balboa or The Incredibles, or you're obviously someone who likes the adventure, action heroes, superhero movies.
Yes.
Yeah. It's awesome. So anyway, one of the first concepts in the book that we spoke a little bit about last time, but is the tongue placement, and why it's the rudder that guides the ship, and as it relates to the breathing vestibular system, and also at how it affects the gait. Could you just touch on the tongue and the relevance to why it's so important?
So the tongue completes information going into the brain. So it's designed to rest on the roof of the mouth, and that's where it belongs. And where it belongs, well, there's information that comes from where it is. So if it's not where it belongs, there's also lack of information going into the vestibular system, which goes into the brain. All that to say is it actually is kind of like completing a circuit when the tongue is resting where it belongs. And in doing so, it makes everything better. So if the brain and the nervous system has all the information it wants, everything's going to move better. And what's wild about that is that is such a small detail of where your tongue is, but it just kind of, to me, highlights that everything matters and that there's nothing separate inside your body. Like, it's all there for a reason, and it all comes together for the big, beautiful symphony or the big, beautiful picture, right? So just simply keeping your tongue where it belongs will allow you to breathe easier, and it will allow you to have more mobility and more strength expression, more power expression. And I know that sounds crazy, but anybody listening to this can try it right now. They can take their tongue and put it on the bottom of their mouth and try to take a deep breath in through their nose. And then they can take their tongue, close their lips, put their tongue on the roof of their mouth and try to take a deep breath in through their nose. And chances are, with the tongue on the roof of the mouth, that deep breath is just going to be easier, bigger, and fuller.
Yeah. And with that, there's another book test in the book that I think it got to do with your shoulder mobility, and you talk about where your tongue is in relation to that.
Yes. So again, if we complete the picture going into the brain, and the brain says, "Man, I know where everything's at. I feel safe. I'm going to let you move." So we can try that same experiment, right? We can take our tongue, put it on the bottom of our mouth, and test our shoulder flexion, or maybe try to touch our toes. And then we can close our lips, put our tongue on the roof of our mouth, and then retest our shoulder flexion or try to touch our toes.
Yeah.
And there's a difference, and that it's an awesome difference, actually. It just again highlights the wonder of everything that's going on inside of us.
Yeah, and that could have been another tip for your uncle getting out of the chair, as well as tongue on the roof of his mouth. Yeah.
One thing at a time. So here's what I'm learning. So in the whole process of meeting a person where they're at, if you freak them out or make them think you're a psycho, you're not meeting them where they're at. So if you start talking about, "Hey man, where are you holding your tongue?"
You've already lost him.
To me, it's just so much easier to say, "Hey, take your right hand, touch your left thigh, and now take your left hand, touch your right." That doesn't seem terribly weird for most people.
Yeah. And there was a study that I looked up, or you actually quoted in the book as well, and you referenced it. And it shows that there's a 30% increase in power in knee flexion just by holding, or based on tongue position, which I found was incredible. Because I mean, you think 30% is a huge number in terms of strength.
That is extremely significant. Now, like, follow that trail. If keeping your tongue where it belongs allows for more strength and power, what could it do for an athlete that's running down a field?
Yeah.
Just like with every single step, if the tongue is where it belongs, with all the forces that athlete is generating and all the power he wants to express, how much more could he express if his tongue was where it belongs? Or how much safer and reduced risk of injury would he have if everything was where it belonged?
Yeah, that's true. And the thing that got me thinking about when I read that study and I read your book was the application to powerlifting. I'm not sure if you're familiar with how powerlifters sometimes use, or I think most of them use, the Gendrastic maneuver, where they bite down on their I guess teeth, and some of them wear actually mouth guards. But would you correlate that to just having their tongue in the right position? Or, I mean, it's yeah.
So there correlate. So strength training, powerlifting is a skill. And basically, in my understanding, when they're doing that, and there's these special mouthpieces to help facilitate this even better. They're operating or taking advantage of the irradiation principle also. So they're creating more muscular irradiation to get more power, or to lift more weight. Yeah. Now, I do think it would be even more and better if their tongue was where it belonged. I think they would get more juice out of it. But that's one of those, that is a legitimate skill for powerlifters or just powerlifting in general. So from a natural human movement standpoint, I don't necessarily, I'm not on board with creating a radiation in my jaw.
No, no,
But
it's dental wise, it's probably not good for your
right,
teeth either.
exactly. Like I think tongue placement is definitely the way to go for natural movement. But if I had it, if I were in a skill that required, more of a skillful mindset, then that's where it, to me, would have its place for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So a quote that I got from the book is your description on strength, which I love, and I'll read now. You said in, I think it's in one of the early chapters, you said strength is the ability to live your life the way you want to live it, to be able to move, think, work, play, love, and laugh throughout your entire life, regardless of your age. And I really, really resonated with me, and I think a lot of people just accept aging as a process, that they need to accept things like pain, not being able to, get in and out of a chair. And I think that sort of encapsulates your mission and your message for people. What is that where all your sort of work comes from, or is that just something I picked up from that?
No, that's pretty much it. Like I firmly believe that no matter how long we get to enjoy this life, we're actually supposed to enjoy it. And
Mm,
really, it's you cannot, like, our emotions are tied to how we move. And when you see a child skip, you see pure joy. And when you see a person that can't move well, you don't see pure joy at all. You see frustration, pain, depression, bitterness, anything that is the opposite of joy.
yeah,
Um, and I think we settle for too much in this world of what we think is normal. And I think we just spend a lot of times being fed the wrong information or believing the wrong information. But if you just step back and look at the design of the body and how everything's tied together, you can almost clearly, plainly see that the body's designed to be strong for throughout its existence.
yeah,
Um, and if and our joy is tied to how we move, and vice versa. So, I mean, they both play and dance together. And I think if a person could just grab hold of that they don't have to settle for arthritis or being slower because they're older, or
mm,
giving up on things that, like the whole mindset of, well, you fall apart once you start to get over a certain decade. That's nonsense.
mm,
And the only thing that makes that true is your belief in it.
mm,
It's
yeah,
because you settle for it. But if you don't settle for it and you resist, it's not even resisting. It's just not accepting it. It's like, if you just don't buy into it,
yeah.
you can be just as free and healthy as you want to be.
Yeah, and that's also what I liked as well. There's a lot of undertones. You talk a lot about the mind, and I think you say a weak mind will lead to a frail body, and a strong mind will lead to a strong body. What, I guess, in terms of creating that link for people, in creating that ability and the belief, how do you do that? Like when you have someone walk through the door in your studio and they might have been beaten down for the last 20 years and they've been working and they haven't been taking care of themselves. I guess it all sort of starts between the ears. What are the steps that you would take to get someone's I guess mindset into believing, because as a coach that you can get someone to do those things, like you got your uncle to stand up, but it's conveying that belief.
So that's the beautiful part of the wonder of the design for me. So it makes sense that it should start between the ears, but unless they can experience it, it's just noise.
Yeah.
So like with my uncle, once he experienced that he didn't have to hurt and that he could easily get up and down, well, now he has the knowledge of the experience and he has to wrestle with that in his mind. But if I just approached him and said, hey, you know what? I bet you can get up and down out of that chair easily and you don't have to hurt. He's going to be like, get out of here. You don't know what you're talking about. I've been hurting for years. How dare you? Right?
Yeah.
Like, so you can't approach somebody mentally as easily as you can. Hey, I'm going to let you experience this and you can discover the wonder in your own self. And now you got to wrestle with it and deal with that. Why do you think you can get up so easy now? If your knee has hurt for the last 20 years, but now it doesn't? Why is that? I bet, you know what? I bet it doesn't ever have to hurt again because, well, it doesn't hurt right now and
Mm.
you're used to it always hurting. What if it never hurt anymore? So now you can create the conversation because they've had the experience of saying, okay, what is this about? And man, I like the guy that squatted, that you talked to, Jim Hatcher, that you talked about at the very first of our
Yeah.
conversation here. I've seen people that have told me, man, I haven't touched my toes in 10, 15 years, but now you have, right? So, so, and once they do, they're like, huh. So again, could they not touch their toes for the last 15 years because they were old and things were falling apart? Or they just believed they couldn't touch their toes, or their body just didn't have what it needed. So which is it? Because now if 20 years later you can do something you couldn't do 20 years before, well, it's not an age thing anymore, is it?
No,
So
no, exactly.
there's something else. So what if you don't have to hurt anymore? What if you can move just as freely as you want to, even though you're 60? What if, right? Because that is the design. So
Mm.
once you can create that experience, now you can have the conversation,
Yeah.
or they can have the conversation in their own mind and wrestle with it. Either way, there's a chance.
Yeah. And I guess giving them that result in the beginning will give them they've either got to wrestle with it as well, but then they're going to be more open to what you say to them next time. Like your uncle's said, you might not be able to say tongue position at the start, but after he's got it in and out of the chair, several times, and he's listened to what you've said, then he's more ready. His level of readiness will be better, I guess.
Yeah. So Kate, just to highlight what you just said. So my aunt was sitting there beside him when this happened, and she smiles and goes, "Okay, so give him something else to do." Like she was already thinking, so what else can he do?
That's awesome. So you talk a lot about as well, um, making things, making hard choices will make things easy later on, and use work capacity as an example. And I think a lot of the drills you do in the book are based around some sort of work capacity as well. What's what's a starting point? Because I know a lot of people, if they haven't been in the gym before and they haven't experienced that level of work capacity, it's hard to get someone to get to that next level. Where would you start with someone working on work capacity?
Well, so again, it would depend on the person and where they physically are. But a ridiculously easy example might be, say, I wanted to help a person realize that, or just become invincible, but they haven't done anything in 20 years.
Mm.
It might be that we just start with, hey, you know what? Let's walk a mile, just 1 mile. Um, especially if they're a very foreign exerciser, they're scared. But the thing is let's walk that mile and try to keep your lips shut. Let's see if we can just breathe in and out. Because man, that's it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be hard.
Yeah,
And the nervous system, if it thinks it's not getting air, is going to start to struggle. It's going to wrestle with the mind, even though they're completely safe, right? So little simple things like that. I mean, that could be like the lowest, easiest beginning place to start for a very deconditioned person. But it may be, like in the book, I've got examples of doing John Brookfield's weight of water, where you're just trying to suspend yourself in a push-up position while you empty water from one bucket and put it into another.
yeah,
I mean, it's extremely gentle. You're never in any kind of physical danger, but it really jacks up the heart rate after a while, and the breathing rate. But if you can learn how to keep your lips shut and start to relax under that stress that the body is perceiving, and under the stress that the mind is starting to perceive, then there's a switch that later gets flipped where everything's okay.
yeah.
The mind calms down, the body calms down, everything slows back down, and it is just learning how to manage the perceived threat or stress that the nervous system's going through.
Yeah, and I guess much like strength as a skill, that in itself can be a skill as well. Like we in the book, you speak about John Brookfield, I guess the inventor or the godfather of battle ropes, how he could do 110 waves per minute for over 2 hours when most people in the gym struggle to do, 20 or 30 seconds of 110 waves per 30 seconds. Like, how do you go from, that base level to get to that? Is it just more of the same and getting that threat level down in your body?
It is. It gets to be managing that stress level and that threat level. And then what that does is it bolsters the belief factor in your brain. Like, because, well, like the easiest example is if I could do 110 waves a minute for 10 minutes, then I know that, well, I can easily do 12 or 15 or 30 minutes. Like, once your mind gets over the hurdle that or the impossible, because if you only can do 30 seconds, 10 minutes seems like a huge impossibility. But, in a matter of a month, you can easily do 10 minutes and then, well, nothing's impossible anymore. So once your brain knows that, well, I got this, it's just going to suck because I'm going to be standing here for so long. But other than that, got this.
Yeah.
So it's just a belief factor. Like, John knows he has no mental limitations, and so therefore he has no physical limitations. So he could stand there for 2 hours. Like, so the only really requirement is the amount of calories or energy it's going to take
to do it
for him to pull that off.
Yeah, which is ridiculous to think you can do it for 2 hours. But I mean, obviously you can. And that's probably where you got your idea for your 44-minute spider crawl around that we spoke about last time. Yeah.
It was, and he is largely to blame for that, on several reasons. But he showed me how to manage stress, and he showed me how to put my mind wherever I wanted to go. And he's the one that said, "Tim, I'll bet you could crawl a mile." So like he had everything to do with that.
Yeah, and with something that's work capacity, or you're working for such a long period of time, obviously your mind needs to go to some sort of neutral place, or almost like a meditation, because if you've got an active sympathetic dominant mind where you're thinking stress, fight or flight, you're going to burn out quickly. How do you, I know you just spoke about it, but from a perspective of something that you're going to have to do an endurance form of that work capacity, what are, I guess, the tips, and where would you go, or how do you get yourself into that neutral state?
So it does at some point, and I don't know, I guess everybody would have to just experience it to discover it, but there does come a point where the movement itself is like a meditation. It's a movement meditation. You just you let go of the stress or the fears, or you just kind of let go of your thoughts. You don't necessarily grab onto them, and you just kind of either focus on what your body's doing, or you start having conversations with God. I mean, so like for me, it would just be these mental conversations in my head, talking with God. So it became a spiritual thing. Yeah. And then, and when that happens, well, time's irrelevant, and it also just flies by. So like, I mean, what 30 minutes can now seem like it only took 5, because your brain and your mind, well, you were focused on something far greater than the struggle that you were going through.
And that's also would have like a restorative effect on the mind, and a calming effect as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which again, now further stimulates your belief on what's possible, what you can do, what you're capable of, or allowing that superhero in you to really come out and discovering that.
So on a side note, I saw on one of your social media posts, I'm not sure it was your specific account or your company's account, but you had a competition in your training studio, and it looked like some sort of championship of members transferring water from one bucket to another in a push-up position. Can you just elaborate on that and tell us what some of the results were?
So we started doing this competition in our studio called the Becoming Bulletproof Games, which was largely inspired by the book. But so it just so happens that last night we had a Becoming Bulletproof Games tournament, and the the champion and the runner-up were competing in a weight of water drill, how long they could last, hold themselves up in that push-up position without cheating, without like trying to pike their butt really high in the air to get relief or whatever. So it was a solid, legitimate plank push-up position while they took a small cup and emptied a 5-gallon bucket, 1 cup at a time, and filled up the other bucket. And then if they filled up the one bucket, they started emptying it and filling up the original bucket again. Like, so it was how long could you last while you constantly moved and kept your knees and body elevated off the floor. And these 2 female ladies who are just beasts, they made it 37 minutes.
Oh my God.
That's what I said. I was like, oh, wow.
I don't even think I could hold a push-up for that long.
That is fierce competition, but I guarantee you both of those ladies know that they can do anything, and there's just nothing they can't do. Oh my gosh. Because if you've never done that drill, 1, it's physically challenging, but 2, it gets to be a mental bear. I mean, I know that both of them right now know how to relax under stress, and that they're both thinking, well, dang, I can just do anything I want to do right now.
What did you speak to them after the challenge? What did they actually say? Like, did they?
So unfortunately, I wasn't there. I wish. As soon as it was over with, our coach, our head trainer, Chris, sent me a text and said 37 minutes for water, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing to me.
Yeah.
And just this morning, he was reliving it, and, telling me, he was smiling ear to ear, and he was showing me how they were like, just like, I guess, apart from each other. Like, it was almost like a standoff where they were just waiting for the other person to stop.
And where do you reckon you feel it the most from a fatigue standpoint? I know like probably the mind's the biggest one that you can't get into, but in terms of like just the structures in your body, like, do you feel it all in the upper body? Are you feeling more in just your breathing rate, or is it just a whole mix?
I have found that it's individual, and where it's intensified the most. Commonplace is shoulders, abs, hip flexors, but then for a lot of people, it's a racing heart. Like it's crazy. Like, you're barely moving at all, but it's almost, your heart rate can almost get up to like you're running sprints. It's really fascinating.
It's amazing. I hope you guys got that on video, because I'd like to see that.
That would be a very long video. I know he took pictures of it and stuff. So
well, maybe a time lapse
shots.
So can we just go through just some of the basic training templates for becoming bulletproof, and how to implement it, and what I guess is a good starting point for someone who's got no structural limitations and they're able-bodied and they're fit. What's the basic template, if you could just run through it?
So the book it has for a template, it starts out with accomplishing certain tasks for time. Like, so you ease into it. It's, like you by inches a cinch, by a yard it's hard, right? So I've got like a handful of tasks that if a person could work up to 10 straight minutes of that task, with dedication, showing up, and just kind of, commitment and patience, it might take patience. And when some tasks, there's like, say, battling ropes for 10 minutes at 110 waves, or one task might be elevated crawling for 10 minutes. But just simple things like that. And once you accumulate the ability to do those tasks, well, 1, you've learned how to manage stress. 2, you're physically capable of pretty much anything you want. But now you've got all these things that you can add together to structure workouts if you wanted to. So it might be that you could take 3 or 4 of those tasks and put them back to back to back and have a 40-minute workout. Now, you don't have to do that. Just completing those tasks in and of themselves is a celebration, and you are pretty much bulletproof. But if you wanted to go further and continue to challenge yourself, you could start to string the tasks together, and you could make a a 20-minute, 30-minute, 40-minute, 50-minute training session, all of just completing those things or
Yeah.
tasks.
And the thing I really like about those is it's minimal equipment. You basically don't need much at all. Just need a stopwatch and you can sort of go away.
That's it. That's it. You just need, I think the most expensive thing was a rope, but then the next expensive thing was a $5 bucket. If you
Yeah.
wanted, if you wanted to do that water drill we were talking about.
Yeah, well, that's testament. You don't need to have a big expensive fit out in your gym. You just need a couple of buckets and and a rope.
That's it. But essentially, if you've got a body, and and a mindset and willpower, you're good to go.
Yeah. And what sort of timeline if someone started that? I know you speak about it in the book, but just for the listeners, if someone applied themselves to those tasks and was diligent with it, like what sort of results could you get in say a month or 6 months of that style of training?
So I really think, for the average person, that you could go from believing something from the impossible to the very possible in a month. Whether it's whether it's only being able to do 30 seconds of waves on a rope to all the way to 10 minutes, I think you could easily get there in a month. And same thing with crawling, elevated crawling. Like if you can only crawl for a minute at a time, I think that it would be very feasible to hit in 4 weeks to hit 10 straight minutes, where it was just easy for you. And
Yeah.
then again, once it's easy, all the brakes come off because there are no physical brakes, but then there's no mental brakes. So everything's cake at that point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the parts of the book that actually started laughing, or made me laugh, was when you spoke about pouring ice buckets on your head for a year straight, and I could just imagine you doing that when you were writing that in the book. Can you tell us that story?
Oh gosh. So my good friend John Brookfield, again, he had encouraged me to engage in ice water dousing. Um, and basically, if you've never done that before, it's kind of like what was that challenge everybody was doing? The
The
ice,
It was
the ice.
for ILS, or I forget the name. There was for I know the one you're talking about, but everyone was doing it on the internet.
Yes, yes, yes. So it's like the ice bucket challenge, right? So he encouraged me to take a 5-gallon bucket, fill it up with ice water, and dunk it on my head. Now, John's an extremist. He also encouraged me to do this in the middle of winter, naked outside. However,
I reckon he's just having a laugh with you. He's like, yeah, just try and do this.
so it does make you wonder, right? Like, I wonder if I can get him to do this. He's amusing himself the whole time. Dang, he did it. So, so he taught me into doing that, and the first day I did it, what a rush! Oh my gosh, it was like a shot of adrenaline, man. It was just the most amazing thing. So naturally, I wanted to do it again the next day, and then something happened in my brain where I was like, what if I just do this every day? And because when you've got that big giant bucket of freezing water, there's this second or nanosecond of fear
Yeah,
before you pour it on your head. But then I got to the point where I was like, I wonder if I could get over that. And if you just do it enough, where it's just like anything, it's just like breathing. It's no big deal at all. It's just something you do.
yeah,
But I'm also I tend to be obsessive and compulsive about things. So somehow in my brain, even though John just encouraged me to do it once or twice, I took it to do it every single day, and don't not do it. No excuses, right? So even if I'm traveling, if I'm at a hotel, I would find the ice machine in the hotel hallway and fill up the hotel trash cans with ice, and then fill them up with water back in the hotel. So I might have 2 or 3 trash cans of ice in the shower at the hotel so that I could have enough to do my
yeah,
ice bucket count. And yeah, it was just one of those things. But every day for a year, It was nothing. It was no longer cold. It was just, and at the time I was a firefighter. And so all the firefighters knew that this Tim was being weird. That was something he did every morning.
Yeah.
Cause it makes a lot of noise. My wife she would get so mad at me for waking her and the family up if we were all in the hotel room. Because obviously the shower's right beside the bed in hotel. So it's just very loud when the ice falls to the floor. But I did it for a year. And then one day I snapped out of it and said, Tim, I don't think you have anything to prove. I don't know why you're doing this anymore. You're good. Just stop. So I stopped.
But in terms of it, I guess plays with your mind because you can't consciously, that there's some level of sort of discomfort, but from, I guess, what you did, you conditioned yourself to kind of accept, maybe not accept is maybe not the right word, but you conditioned yourself for it to be sort of normal and for it to not create a stress response.
Yeah. So I got it to where it was no longer uncomfortable. It just was.
You didn't get the rush anymore.
No, yeah, right. There was just no rush to it. There was no like nothing like where it was just like, and because I had done it so many times and showed up for it so many times.
Yeah. And I guess that comes back to the underlying, everyone's a superhero. You can sort of, you prove to yourself that you could actually do that if and I guess that articulates your whole book in terms of, you showed people that you can take what something's completely uncomfortable, like whether it's, using battle ropes for 10 minutes, whether it's crawling for 10 minutes, whether it's pouring an ice bucket on your head, it's all relative in terms of what you're talking about.
Yeah. And the cool thing is, and I'll be completely honest, if right now I had a 5-gallon bucket full of ice water, that would be an awakening. Because now I have not experienced that in a while, but I also know that training like this, so those tasks that we were just talking about for stringing together your workouts, once you can do something so I went at least a whole year without doing battling ropes at all. And one day, I just picked it up and 10 straight minutes, easy, nothing to it at all. It was like I never stopped doing it.
Yeah, it's because you had that belief and because you knew you've done it before. You probably
absolutely
that didn't go away, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
So just, I guess, moving from the book, actually still talking about the book, but what was it like writing a book? Now you've written, I've lost track of how many books you've actually written, but what's the process like? Do you obviously enjoy writing and coming up with new books?
I do, from a creative standpoint, mostly I enjoy it because I don't know what I'm going to necessarily write. To me,
you sit down.
So yeah, so what I've learned is with me is I don't know how to explain this. It's almost like an opportunity to allow. This is how I've come to learn it, to allow God to express Himself. Where I don't know necessarily what He's going to teach me or say or write, but I find out in the moment of it, which is fun. I don't necessarily know what's going to happen, but I get to be involved in the process.
Yeah.
And that I love because that is.
You're more like a conduit. You kind of just let it, I guess, get expressed through you.
Yeah. And it may be that I've seen it for the first time in the moment of when when I'm writing it out, and that is so neat to me. It's very fun.
And so when you were sitting down to write the Becoming Bulletproof Project, did you have an idea in your head what you were going to write, or you just started banging on the keyboard and then 10 weeks or 6 months later you've got a book? Is that how it sort of happened for you, or the creative process? Is that what it looks like for you?
Yeah, for the most part, it might be that I know I have an idea to tell you how to increase your work capacity for battling ropes, right? I know how to tell you that, But all the rest of the stuff in that book was me just sitting down and seeing what happens.
Yeah, and I must say, like out of all, like because I've read, countless strength books, and I've read the likes of Dan John, all those other strength writers, but yours has more of kind of like a story, like it's there's an interwoven story into it, and it kind of that book I sat down and literally read it in an afternoon. It's not like some of the strength books you pick up and you got to like, okay, I'm making it through this chapter today. Whereas yours it was easy to read, and you're still getting information across.
Oh, that's awesome, and that's good, neat to hear,
Yeah,
because and yeah, so it was kind of like a story because like really, man, that book is pretty much my experience that. And what I'm learning, and even what I'm learning in the moment as I'm writing it too. So it's really it is a very neat process to go through.
And so we touched on it last time, like your daily habits and routines. But in terms of like creatively for your writing, I know you obviously write a lot. You have blogs, and you produce a lot of content for your company. When do you do that sort of creative stuff? Is there like a certain time of the day that you find you're more productive?
I loosely, yes. It's during when the sun is up.
Yeah.
Typically in the between like 10 to 2 o'clock, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And mostly because that's when my kids would be at school or I can be left alone.
Yeah.
So as far as a routine though goes, so now it's summertime, the kids are out of school, everything's up for grabs. Basically, it's really whenever I can sit down
Yeah.
and try to. So my biggest responsibility to write is to carve out a time just to sit down and see what happens.
Yeah. And then what sort of like time would you sit down for? An hour? Would you sit down for? I know it's dependent on your family and that sort of stuff, but to get in that sort of process of creative writing, or not creative writing, but in terms of getting the juices flowing, what are the timelines for you?
I found that a typical like blog article typically takes me around an hour.
Okay.
To sit down. And the cool thing about that though is that it seems like I get lost in the time because I think I'm going to bang something out in 20 minutes, or if I feel like I've got this inspiration that it's going to take real quick, 20 minutes. And then I'll look up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm late to go train somebody. I got to go.
Yeah.
I've been here an hour.
Yeah. And on that, how much actually training? Because you obviously like super busy with writing, you've got your business, and you also still coach people, which we spoke about last time. You still enjoy, and you get to try on your new like tricks on people. But how much coaching time would you put in a week?
Like I might teach 2 or 3 classes a day in the morning hours,
Okay.
and then come lunchtime through the rest of the day, that's when I'll try to either write or do video editings or video ideas for the YouTube channel, stuff like that. So the creative stuff typically after mid morning to mid afternoon. But so most of my training is early in the mornings. During the week, I try not to train as much in the evenings just because of my children's schedule, my family schedule.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So what's next for you? What's next for Tim and Original Strength? What's in the pipeline?
Man, that's a really good question.
Any future books or?
So that's I'll be honest, man. After Becoming Bulletproof Project came out, I had to. It was a quick celebration, and then it was just like, well, dang, Tim, I don't know if you'll ever write anything again. It was just this weird little. It was stupid, but so I am optimistic that there is another book in me. I don't know what it is, which is the fun part. But I'm still, I'm still learning stuff. Like I told you, my mindset is really shifting away from the exercise world to the, hey, just how are we supposed to be kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it would not surprise me if I wrote something about that in that vein anyway.
Yeah. Awesome. So last time you were on, I had a series of questions, rapid fire questions at the end, but because you've already answered those, we're not going to do those again. So just the last question, I didn't ask you this last time, but if you could turn back the clock and give yourself advice, whether it was 10 or 20 years ago or when you just entered the industry, what advice would you give to yourself? Or if it's too hard to give advice to yourself, what would you give advice to, like, say, a new trainer or a coach?
Dang. That's tough, Adam. For me, if I were giving myself advice back then, it would be don't believe everything you hear, or everything you read. It's okay to question. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to doubt. And that is now when I do talk to new trainers, that is exactly what I tell them. It is okay to wonder if things are the way that you were taught. It's okay to question whoever the guru is or whoever the system is or whatever the system is. And it's okay to test it. Because that is how you learn. Because if you just take it at face value and you assume that it is the only way or that it's the gospel, then you're robbing yourself the opportunity to truly know something. So I think it would be it's okay to investigate something. Don't just accept something as the way it is just because that's what somebody told you.
Yeah, that's good advice. So I'll definitely link to your book and your social media accounts and your website in the show notes. But just want to thank you for all your time today and for writing the Becoming Bulletproof Project. It was enjoyable to read, and I've shared it with a few coaches I know now. So your message is definitely out there.
Adam, hey man, thank you so much for having me on the show the second time. I really do appreciate it, man. It is really fun to get to talk to you.